Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone in YouTube land. What we're going to do today is I'm going to consider this episode 1, the very first video discussing the build for the 1932 Ford 3-window coupe Highboy that I teased about in previous videos. What we're going to start with today, over the last week or so, I've started acquiring parts, which is always, of course, the first step in starting a build. Now, I don't actually have the body or the frame as of yet, due to backlogs at the manufacturers. They take roughly about 16 weeks from the date it's ordered. Now, as I mentioned in a previous video, my daughter and I went to Nexa, Missouri to Show Me Rod and Custom to look at their 32 3-window and their frames. I was extremely impressed with what I saw there. And to be honest with you, I probably would have already ordered the frame and the body as of now, but the reason I'm waiting is prior to discovering where Show Me was and the fact that they're only about 400 miles from me driving distance, I had already booked a plane ride and room to go to Buffalo, New York to visit AC Autos. Now, AC Autos is a little bit less expensive a kit. The early reviews I've read on that particular kit is outstanding. The downside is when you really dig into the nuts and bolts of the kits, the AC Auto kit, the steel reinforcement for the body, the electric windows, the glass kit, the headliner fiberglass piece, all of those are extra cost options. And when you start adding on all of those options that, by the way, on the Show Me kit are completely included, it starts narrowing the price differential quite a bit. And then when you add on to that the price of shipping from Buffalo, New York, basically a body and frame, chances are they're going to be very, very close in price. Now, I've already got the trip to Buffalo booked. I feel like I need to do my due diligence and go up there and check it out, and I'm certainly going to do that. I'm going to talk price with them on everything that I need and get a quote from them, and then I'm going to make my decision. But early indications are when I get back from that trip next week, I will go ahead and start talking to the guys at Show Me and get the kit ordered. So the body and frame hopefully will be about 16, 17 weeks out from today. Now, I've gotten, as I said, a lot of parts in this week. Some used stuff, which I'll go over, and some of the new stuff for the chassis and suspension, which is what I always start with in a build, is the underpinnings, the frame, chassis, the suspension, front suspension, rear suspension, motor mounts, transmission mounts, all of that stuff that goes into the underpinnings to form the foundation of the car. Now, of course, with that, I need the wheels and everything to set up how I need to have everything ready to go, and I'm going to get into that in just a moment when I discuss what I've received this week. I'm going to be making another short video sometime next week exactly like this, because I do have some parts that are pending that have not arrived yet, and as soon as those arrive, I will of course touch on that as well. And I'll be doing this all along in the first series of videos on this, discussing the parts that I've got coming in, and then of course we'll chronicle the build and everything that goes into it. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the stuff that I've received so far. Now, what you're going to see here, the first thing you're going to see is an engine and transmission, or not an engine and transmission, a transmission and a rear end. Now, these two pieces I actually happened onto quite luckily. I just discovered recently that there is a hot rod shop very near to my house that I went and visited last week. Went in there and talked to the nice people there. It's a Saxy Rod Shop is the name of it. It's in Saxy, Texas. Very, very cool people. While I was in there, the nice gentleman that owns the place was showing me around the facility. Among the other things that they have in there is they have a 1970 Ford Torino GT that they are putting a full-blown frame suspension, coyote swap, the whole 9 yards in it, and they had stripped all of these parts out of it, and it just so happened the owner of the car was coming into the shop the very day that I was there to pick up the stuff that wasn't going to be used. Well, he and I started talking, and this stuff that you see in front of you is exactly what I needed for this build. Now, this transmission right here that you see is a Ford C4 medium-duty 3-speed automatic, which is really, really nice for these coupe builds. because they're very small in size. A lot of newer transmissions are really, really huge in this area here to account for all of the added gears, the overdrives, and everything else. This is a very bare-bone, basic 3-speed automatic, and it is perfect for a street rod build if you couple it with the right gears. You have to go with a much taller gear in the rear end to make up for the fact that you don't have the overdrive. Now, of course, the benchmark and preferred rear end in any street rod build is the typical Ford 9-inch rear end. Yes, it's the same rear end that NASCAR uses, and the reason people love them is they're plentiful. Although they are getting a little harder to find, they are plentiful, and they literally came in everything from mid-size, full-size cars, F-Series trucks, and everything else. But the great thing about these rear ends is they are really just absolutely bulletproof. Now, this rear end, it came out of the Torino as well, and I happened onto it very luckily. It is not a traction lock or Positrack, as the Chevrolet guys like to call it. It is an open differential, which is perfectly fine for this build that we're doing, because this coupe is going to be a daily driver. It is meant for us to enjoy, go to shows, go to rod runs, things like that, and just enjoy the car. We're not building a race car, so the open differential is perfect. I did the math on it. It's a 273 gear ratio, which is very, very tall, but is perfect for this transmission. So I'm going to leave that differential in it. Of course, I'm going to have to go through it. It's going to have to be narrowed. Right now, this rear end from hub to hub is 61 inches. I'm probably going to need it more in the neighborhood of between 55 and 57 inches. But I do have a guy here in town locally that does do that kind of work. So we are going to narrow this rear end and the axles. But the cool thing about this rear end, not only is it a 9-inch, not only does it have a gear ratio that I can use, but it's also got some very nice axles in it. I don't know if you can see that or not, but those are Quick Performance 31 spline axles, which I've used the stuff from Quick Performance many, many times. It's top-notch quality. It's a company in Iowa. If you need a new rear end built for you, either 8 or 9-inch rear end, I definitely recommend those guys because they are absolutely top quality. And the cool thing about them as well is they're literally about half the cost of a comparable Strange rear end or other such things such as that. So Quick Performance in Iowa is who I would recommend for that. Now, moving on, the first thing you're going to see is these are the front wheels we're going to use. The vibe we're going to go on this, these are Rocket Launcher series. This is a 15 by 4.5. It's a very narrow wheel. The vibe we're going for on this particular car is very simple, very straightforward. We're going for the old school hot rod look with the huge, big Halabrand style rear wheels on it and the narrow front spoke style like this. Now the rear wheels have not come in yet. They are going to be drop shipped from Rocket, the manufacturer. Not looking for those until probably mid-December at the earliest. So those have not come in. Now these, as beautiful as they are not going to stay polished aluminum like this. I've got a gentleman who I've used on many, many builds. He is his name is Jacob. He is at Ideal Coatings in Garland, Texas. And I'm going to take the wheels once I get all 4 of them into Jacob, and we're going to powder coat these a very beautiful color that is called wet black that he has discovered that basically looks like a chrome just like this, only it's a black chrome as opposed to the shininess. And to go along with the vibe and the look that my daughter Steph is wanting to design into this car, we're going to go with the black chrome look on the suspension parts and the wheels and everything else. But those, again, that is a 15 by 4.5 Rocket injector series. I'm going to put Rocket Igniter Series rears 15 by 10 inch on the back, and of course it's these typical Ford 5 by 4.5 bolt pattern. This here is for the front disc brakes. These are the rotors for the front disc brakes kit I got from Speedway Motors. This kit comes all inclusive with the rotors here. Everything you see in this nice little box here is all of the hardware, brake lines, the rubber brake lines, that is, calipers, the brake pads are in here as well as all of the caliper mounts and everything else. Now I'm going to get to the spindles in just a moment because my previous video dealt with a piece that was in this particular kit that I've already dealt with, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But we're going to move along here. This right here is most of the rear suspension, save the coilover shocks. I am putting a what is called a triangulated 4-link rear suspension with coilover shocks. I do not have the coilovers as of yet, but this has all of the brackets and mounts, the bars, the mounts that go onto the rear end, and of course when we get ready to and actually start building the car, you'll see how this comes into play. I know this just looks like a bucket of parts right now, but this is basically 80% of the rear differential mounting system. All I'm needing is the coilover shocks, which will be here soon. Now these we touched on in the previous video. 1937 Ford style front spindles. This is what mounts on the front I-beam axle. The I-beam axle, of course, is not in yet. It will be here sometime next week, and I'll do a video when I receive that. This, as you can see, that little sleeve that's on it right here, that's what I touched on in the previous video. If you remember using the oven because I didn't have a press, and as you can see, those spacers are on there. They're not coming off. They're ready to go. The rear bearing sits over this little race right here, and of course you slip the rotor on. The front wheel bearing and all the mounting hardware go onto the spindle there. You've also got a bracket out of this box here that mounts the calipers off of the spindle as well. So that's my front spindles, all that mounts up the front disc brake kit going onto the wheels. Now this is the first pieces of the front suspension other than the brakes and spindles. These are split wishbones. Now there's a couple of different front end styles that you can go with. One is a parallel 4-link kit, which a lot of people like. You can go with an independent Mustang 2 style front suspension, which is really good, but I don't like the way it looks compared to the old school straight regular dropped I-beam axle, which is what we're going to go with. They have radius rods that you can use that are kind of similar to this but look different. But this right here, now the principle of this is it's like the old school wishbone that came in the car originally, and they were originally shaped like this. And what you do is they are split at the rear, and you put a threaded bung in it right here to mount the tie rod ends right there. This right here welds onto the frame and mounts up the tie rod, as you can see right there. This part right here goes over the front I-beam axle, and of course we will get into all of that. I've still got to get the axle in, the spring shackles. There's a monolith spring that I've got coming in, and the Panhard bar and all of the steering linkage. Now the Panhard bar, what it does is it stabilizes the front end because I'm using the basic Vega steering box, the Chevrolet Vega steering box, which is a very small box for cross steering. And we'll of course get into all of that, how all that works in the coming videos. The last thing I got in, of course, this right here. These are spring perches that go through here into the axle, and the spring shackles mount off that, which mounts the spring. And of course, once I start building the thing and showing you how all of this goes together, it'll be a little bit easier to understand. All of you old school hot rodders, you know exactly what we're dealing with here. But I'm really excited. This project's becoming real now. I'm starting to get parts in for it. So I'm really looking forward to getting going on this and getting the big pieces in. In the coming days, I'll post more videos as more parts come in, and then when the body and frame get here, that's when we really start doing the magic and getting it working and getting everything together and assembled, get it in body and paint, get it together, and all of that. One other thing I've got coming in is I managed to locate the transmission and rear end, as I noted, are going to have to be gone through and rebuilt. I have a core engine out of a 1987 Mustang. It's the 5.0 or 302 HO series roller cam engine. I've got a core for that strangely enough I used originally as mock-up for this truck, which I put a 351 Windsor in it actually after much was decided. I sold that engine to an individual who's a good friend of mine and who I've done a lot of business with down in Houston. He has sold some things and decided he doesn't need it anymore. So in the coming days, I'm going to zip down to Houston and buy that engine block back from him. And that's the engine that's going to go into it, which is a 87 Mustang GT 302. Well, that's it for today. I appreciate your time in joining me today. Be sure and hit that like and subscribe button. I do not do this page for monetary reasons. I'm not in this for the money. I'm just in this to share in the car community what I like to do. And of course, I love hearing from you guys out there that do these kind of builds as well. So keep the comments and the likes coming. Be sure and subscribe to my page. And we got another video coming soon. I appreciate it. Have a good day.